Okay, we're going to get started. Thanks everyone for coming today. So today is going to be a little different than our first two office hours. It's going to be a little bit more informal. We're here to mainly answer questions that people have. As you might have noticed, we don't have a Q&A this chat function today. We have just the full chat, so you can use the chat. You'll notice that you can choose everyone. That will be everyone on the call today. Or you can send questions or comments to just all panelists or one of the panelists. And we will be starting off today. I will go through kind of what we're going to do. And then we have a couple of things lined up to talk about updates and questions that have come through already, but you can feel free to add more questions as we go in the chat, and we will address them in kind of a true verbal Q&A style today. So we're going to go over the timeline. I'm going to go over some resources that address some of the questions that already came up in the registration forms, and then we'll go into some other verbal Q&A. Reminder that the timeline, of the timeline, we are in the December, the blue period, which is the full data cleaning and review process. As a reminder, this blue phase is where you should hopefully have a successful upload in the HDX 2.0 already, where you're getting flags, errors, and warning notes that you can then start working on, updating your HMIS. If you haven't, reach out to your liaison through the regional inbox or your vendor, depending on what the issue might be, so that you can get that successful upload. And then otherwise, it's just, as Sean has mentioned a bunch of times before, it's just that tennis match, going back and forth, figuring out your flags, updating your data, re-uploading your LSA submission, etc. If you have questions about that process, feel free to put them in the chat. And feel like I am forgetting something, but just we have another office hours next Tuesday on the 13th, so we'll be back with the same kind of format next week. So you'll get to see us before the winter break, but just to let everyone know, like Thanksgiving, we will be out those gray dates in between Christmas and New Year's, and that last 1/11 is our current deadline. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Just for anyone new here, this is office hours for anything LSA related. So I did just want to mention, there's a lot of different things that people in COCs and related to kind of homelessness and housing could have questions about and could be working on. And today, the scope of this question and answer period is just about things related to the LSA. So we might not get to all of your questions either if we don't have time or if they don't apply to kind of the LSA scope of today's call. So some of the questions that we have gotten made me want to just remind people of the information that's already out there available for you to look at immediately. And one of those main resources is past HMIS lead webinars. If you don't know what those are or how to get be a part of them, you can definitely ask your liaison, or other people that you work with probably know about it. It might not be the right place for you because they talk about more things broader than just the LSA, but I pulled out here in this slide the things that would help you or be relevant for the LSA process and what websites. So if you go to the HMIS lead webinars and archive, that link at the top, that has all of the webinars, and you can reference this for just kind of the LSA pieces on them. I wanted to special point out, someone asked about tips and tricks from seasoned admins, and you'll notice in the November call, which is posted, all of these are posted already on the HUD Exchange. We did have partners from, community members from ICA in Minnesota kind of talking about how they approach LSA data cleaning during this time period as well as throughout the year. So definitely check out that. And then the next resources we have for you are our previous LSA office hours. So office hours 1 is already posted on the HUD Exchange, and there's a link to that. I'm seeing that it's still displaying the title slide. Can everyone else see slides? Because I think I'm on slide 5.
Did I see Kira?
Okay, perfect. Great, thank you for the thumbs up. Kelly, or Jean, maybe you can message Kelly and see.
Yep, I'm on it.
Thank you. So the office hours 1 is posted. There's a link to that. The link was sent out. The office hours 2 that we hosted last week will be posted on Thursday. So then there will be another listserv sent out with those materials, the link to those materials, as well as the link to next week to register for next week's office hours. So the things that I wanted to point out here are that some people asked about the submission process, and you can find this and HDX 2.0 demos in our first office hours that's already posted. You can also find them in some of the HMIS lead webinars that are on that previous slide. And if you have more specific questions about that, you can put them in the chat today. Another couple people asked about the DQ tool, and that was also covered in our LSA office hours last week. So that's the only one that's not up yet, but as of Thursday, you'll be able to access the slides for that and the recording, which has information about the tool and a little demo of it. Just a reminder, the DQ tool as of right now is the one that's kind of been up for a while. There is a new HMIS DQ tool that hasn't been released yet that Jesse Jorstad demoed on the November HMIS lead meeting. So I just wanted to kind of make that distinction clear. They are doing the same types of things, but are slightly different, and there are different demos out there right now. A listserv will go out when the new tool is up and running, and so you'll get that information then. For now, we're still using the current tool that's been around. We don't have an official date for the new tool yet. It's still in testing, so you'll just have to, I'm sure, you know, if we have more information on this in this call next week, or if there's more information for the next admin calls, we will give that information. Otherwise, I would just be on the lookout for that listserv saying that it's available. Yeah. If you, Jesse is not on this call today, but if you do have other more specific questions about the DQ tool, you're welcome to put them in the chat here, and we can get back to you and post them in our Q&A, our formal Q&A when we post these materials. You are also welcome to directly reach out to the AAQ desk with any DQ tool questions. And then lastly, there was some questions about just common issues addressing warnings. Again, last week, we talked about the Common Flags Library, Common Data Quality Issues Doc, and demo, which might help answer your questions. If you have more specific questions about that, feel free to put them in the chat today. And this is just the resource link that we included in last week's presentation, and we're just including this here for your reference. And then a reminder, as I said, we have one more this year next Tuesday. Then we're taking a couple weeks off for the holidays. We'll be back here with office hours on January 3rd, and we'll do a final office hours on January 17th. So getting into more of the Q&A part of this, we are going to be taking questions from the chat. Right after this, Sean and Victoria are going to be giving you some Weebly updates and other updates of things going on in the LSA world and HDX system. But I just wanted to note the things on this slide are questions we got that came in through the registration link that we just needed a little bit more specific information on in order to address it, just because these questions could be really broad. So if you're someone that's on this call that had one of these questions, we are happy and would love to answer your specific questions if we can, but just go ahead and put, your specific question or a little bit more about what you would like us to talk about if these are one of your topics, or if, you didn't submit a topic and they're still one of your topics, feel free. And the last thing I just wanted to call out, we got a couple questions about talking about decision trees for correcting errors and for updating HMIS. We cannot talk about those on this call, or we're deciding not to talk about decision trees or prioritization for addressing flags. That one we're not going to talk about today because it is such an individualized conversation that it's best to talk about that one-on-one with your liaison and review team. And so if you do have questions, we're hoping at this point, there's still a lot of weeks left. We're hoping everyone can get to a really good place cleaning their data or maybe addressing all of their flags. If in the coming weeks, you don't think that you're going to be able to adjust your flag, something comes up, etc., reach out to your review team through your regional inbox and just explain what's going on and what you'd like help with, and then they can work with you on an individual basis to kind of get you a plan that will work right for you. And that's just really hard to do in a setting like this. And then the second one, updating HMIS. We just wanted to call out that we do not share HMIS systems on these calls, and we don't share HMIS like screenshots or anything when communicating with you all, just because of the risk for sharing PII unintentionally. And so PII can't be shared. It's why we won't share screenshots or anything of actual HMIS systems, and we know that can be very frustrating given, kind of some of the things that might be very specific to your HMIS system and hard to explain. We encourage you to try to explain that to your liaison, work with your vendor, other people that might be able to help you that can actually see what your HMIS system looks like, and also they look so different. So that's just outside of the scope of our team's abilities, but yeah, so I just wanted to address that, and I'm going to now stop talking and turn it over to Sean.
Hey everybody, hope everybody is well. Let me share my screen so that we can show you what we refer to as the Weebly page. Okay, so here is HDX. You should see my screen now. And if you wanted to access what we refer to as the Weebly page, which is the HDX info page, issues page, then you can just, on this banner, you can click on this link right here. That will take you to this page, which has the most up-to-date information about current and known issues in HDX. So just to review, in case you haven't taken a look at these, since last Wednesday, we've had this announcement in place. Basically, there has been a bug. It specifically refers to this issue here, that has made it the case that for some subset of COCs, folks that uploaded their first data set before the 15th of November, there may be a possibility that you might lose some notes and or warning flag statuses when you re-upload. So folks can still re-upload, and you should know that your warning notes and flag statuses are always recoverable, but you might need to request that from us. So this is just a heads up in case there is something that you observe that is funky. You should know that we are working on it now and expect to fix very soon. Additionally, there has been another small issue here that might affect a small number of COCs that might also be basically involve losing notes. We expect this in a small minority of cases. All to say that it's basically your best bet before anytime you re-upload is, for the time being, for you to download your error and warnings report so that you have it in a tabular spreadsheet version on your own, just to keep a record of it for your own purposes. The last patch that we put in was last week. This one in particular was throwing some folks off. Some flags were appearing without descriptions or variables, so that has been fixed. So you should have seen those. If you don't see it fixed now, then it should be addressed with a re-upload. That's almost always the next course of action after a fix has been implemented. So yeah, we'll update this section as soon as we do have a fix. We'll also update the banner message so that you can stay apprised of that. And otherwise, thanks to everybody who's offered us a lot of encouragement at this time. We're hearing from a lot of COCs that despite some of these issues, this has been one of the easiest submission periods this year. And we hope that that's the case, especially after these most recent issues are involved. So I know some questions have come in. I'll stop sharing my screen now and we can turn to those together.
Could you just show, we did get one question about how to navigate and what to click on. So if you could just point that out on your,
sure.
To get to the
right. To get to the Weebly, yeah, you would come here once you're logged into the HDX page. And if you go to the LSA module, then you'll see this blue banner here, and there's a hyperlink right there that will take you to the warning and issues page, which we otherwise refer to as the Weebly page.
You can put that in the chat as well. And then I think, Jean, if you want to, we don't need to share any, yeah, we can take the PowerPoint down and then Victoria, take it away.
Sure. So one thing that we did not see on the Weebly that we will update soon, these are just like a couple of flag updates for everyone that are not currently there on the site. Flags 1245 and 1246 are going to have a threshold, a new threshold of about 5, I believe that is. And those flags are age-related flags and are looking at like population differences. So if you are currently getting those flags and you've got a difference of 5 or less, on a replacement upload after this fix goes in, those should drop off. Now, those are the only age-related flags that are going to have this threshold. And the reason why I mention that is because we've been getting a lot of questions about age-related flags. Off the top of my head, flag 693 and similar flags are kind of stumping some COCs, or a lot of COCs, flag stumping too. Those flags are talking about when subpopulations are greater than the overall population. So for 693 specifically, you might see something like 22 to 24-year-olds. That number is greater than your 18 to 24-year-olds, right? So the subpopulation is greater than the overall population. Typically, when I see that, it is related to aging in and out of population groups. And personally, when I have looked at COC's flags, the discrepancies that I've seen have been very small, so 5 or below, or thereabouts. And larger discrepancies, larger differences than that may indicate underlying data quality issues or programming errors. But if you're seeing just small numbers for those flags, you know, what we've been telling COCs is to just isolate or find the clients that are indicated in the flag, and then just confirm that the date of birth is correct for all of those clients. And what you'll probably see is that for some of them, they have aged in and out of population groups, whether that was in their current enrollment or in between enrollments, or maybe they've got multiple enrollments. That's typically the issue. So if you can just confirm that that data is correct on your end, that's usually all we're asking for in the notes. But if you do see larger discrepancies, much larger than 5, I would take a closer look and reach out to your liaison if you're seeing that, so we can kind of figure out what the next step should be on that. That is all that I have for specific flag related updates. I do have some questions that I can jump in and answer. If anyone else on the team wants to jump in and kind of tag team or take things from me, because I feel like I can talk for a long time, please do stop me. But I'll just jump right in. So one of the questions that we got was, you know, how do you create an LSA CSV file, right? All of the trainings, all of the webinars that we've been on so far only shows what to do after the CSV. is created. And a related question that we got was, what are the steps to run your reports in HMIS and get them to upload, right? How do you check your error reports in HMIS? Unfortunately, as Kira mentioned, we're all using different vendors. So it is really difficult for us to give you advice because of that. So your best bet would be to reach out to your vendor to see what specific steps you need to take to run your LSA export. What specific steps do you need to take to run any of your vendor provided data quality reports? And if you're using the HMIS CSV data quality tool and you have questions about how do you generate a CSV file that you can use with that tool, again, that is something that you will need to reach out to your vendor and get an answer on. Anybody want a popcorn, or I can keep going?
Go ahead through your initial couple, and then that'll give people time to.
Sure. All right. Another question that we received was, I am not seeing changes after making corrections in HMIS. There are a lot of moving pieces in HMIS. I'm sure everyone here on the call knows that HMIS can be nuanced and complex. And so you're going to want to be sure that you are correcting all related areas in HMIS before you export your data again and upload it into HDX 2.0. So that's not a very happy answer, but as a former HMIS admin, I understand that frustration. So please do double check that you have made your data corrections in every little nook and cranny in your system before you re-upload. Another question that we got, this one is from Wendy, and it is related to rapid rehousing bed and unit inventory. So this is also a question that has come up a lot. And just to kind of read through what her response is. So there is a PDF resource that some of you may be familiar with, and I think we can drop that in the chat for people here a little later. But it describes how rapid rehousing bed and unit inventory should be reported depending on what they are trying to achieve, but they are still encountering difficulties in reporting rapid rehousing inventory for LSA purposes. Most of our rapid rehousing projects do not have a set number of beds and units that they are expected to fill, or a set number of persons expected to be housed on a given night. And that is I would say that that's pretty standard for rapid rehousing projects. What also makes it a bit tricky or difficult is the fact that the bed and unit inventory guidance that you get on the housing inventory count, the HICK, is different than the inventory guidance in the HMIS data standards for rapid rehousing. So on the HICK, you report rapid rehousing beds that are occupied, but for HMIS, you're reporting what is essentially the estimated average max number of people that you can serve on a given night. The HMIS data standards section 2.07, that's the big bed and unit inventory section, does have a set of guidelines or methodologies that you can follow that will help you estimate the number of beds for rapid rehousing or any other project that doesn't have a fixed or set number of beds and units. I'm thinking of like motel, hotel voucher programs. Those are also kind of in the same boat. And so I would advise anyone who has questions about that to review that section. But essentially, you are making that estimate based on, got it up actually right here. If y'all will just give me a little bit of time. I should have had it up before, just because I know that this is a big deal. So taken directly from the HMIS data standards, and this would apply to rapid rehousing or again, any other project that doesn't have a set number of beds. So projects that provide emergency shelter or housing rental assistance vouchers, and they do not have a fixed number of units or vouchers, should determine the number of beds and units based on the maximum number of persons and households who can be housed on a given night. That could be estimated from like your current HMIS data. It could be estimated from similar projects in your HMIS system, and you just kind of like take an average of that. But that is essentially what we would expect. And we also understand that the bed numbers for rapid rehousing on the HICK are going to differ than what you have reported in HMIS. But we do have the expectation that rapid rehousing bed inventory is going to be reported in HMIS.
Okay. So, Tanya, you have a question about utilization warnings related to 0 people served.
Yeah, this question was from Kai. And I think you're right. The first step that I always recommend there is just to look up those clients that seem to be enrolled in rapid rehousing projects and make sure that they have move-in dates. If they don't have move-in dates, they won't pull in as clients in rapid rehousing for the LSA.
Sorry, just a minute.
There's one other one I could answer if you want me to.
Yeah, the no clients with move-in dates, or
Oh no, there's another one. There was a question from Joseph on comparisons with the HICK and bed counts. And so you said that you've identified that there were inaccuracies in the information in 2022 HICK. And you asked whether or not you should specify which projects and which project types and household types were causing the error. If you have that information ready, you can certainly add that in the note. But what we care most about is verifying that the LSA data is what's accurate. And so if your note just says that there were discrepancies between, or sorry, that there were projects missing in the HICK, or that the inventory dedicated to adults with children or adult-only households were incorrect in the HICK, that should be sufficient enough for us.
And then I think this might be for follow-up for Tanya and or Victoria about the RH section info, where it can be found. Oh, sorry, I think we did answer that. So, John, did you want to answer some of your questions?
Yes, yeah, I have 2 outstanding questions I can answer. So the first is from Nate. Nate asked if it's okay to re-upload a submission when it's in the submitted status. The answer is yes, Nate, you can do that, especially if you had your first submission after November 15th. But otherwise, a fail-safe that will work is if you download or press the export button on your warning flags page, and then just get your own copy of your warning flags. If anything were to happen in this kind of yellow period where we've issued this directive to kind of be cautious about your uploads, then you can still like restore your own notes easily. If you wanted us to restore your notes, you can do so. You just have to request it through your liaison. But yeah, I personally would prefer to just download my own notes and then just keep my own copy. So, and Nate, after we remove this directive to be this kind of yellow directive, what I've called this yellow directive about being cautious to upload your notes, then everybody should be able to re-upload without any issue. So just stay tuned for that. That'll be put on the Weebly and the page. Otherwise, we have another question from, I believe it's Tashika. I'm sorry for the pronunciation if that's not correct. It's I believe you're from Connecticut 502, who's asked 503, who's asking about server processing errors. So this individual is saying that they've experienced a server processing error on their upload error report when they try to upload. This is happening specifically for CT 503, and unfortunately, we're still diagnosing this issue. And we'll keep you updated as soon as we have more to say about it. For you personally, the best course of action is every time you upload, just let Lola, your liaison, know so that we can continue to kind of monitor the status of it. And thank you for your patience. For other folks, if you continue to experience server processing errors, please let us know about it as soon as possible. And by us, I specifically mean your liaison, the AHAR _ region X at aptosos.com.
And there was a question about someone not being able to, sorry, it's back, write notes in there. Ooh, sorry. I'm unable to enter notes or comments on our warning flags in HDX. Is this an ongoing issue, or should I just re-upload this from Joshua Fuentes?
Let me take a look at that, Josh. Maybe in the meantime, we can ask some other questions. Josh is from Hawaii 501. That's just my memory. Let's see here. Josh, I'll get back to you about that. Happy to help, Tachika. If I'm pronouncing your name correctly, yeah. Sorry about that. Okay.
Just want to hop in and circle back around to some of the bed inventory questions. So Nate asked to confirm the rapid rehousing bed inventory in HMIS does not have to be the same as the inventory reported in the HICK. That is correct. In fact, we would probably expect that. You may still get a flag, but a simple note explaining that the difference is due to the fact that there, were X number of people occupied in a bed on the night of the HICK versus the difference in the maximum average number of people nightly that could potentially be served in the project. That would be a sufficient enough note. And then while we are still on the topic of bed inventory, I've got a question from John Gibbons that is asking, I have a project that calls all their beds AC, or adults and children, but they do not serve any children. They still classify their beds as adult AC. Do I need to tell them that they can't do it, or do I just explain that in a note? They must feel that since they would take children, they call the beds adult child households. I mean, that's a really good point, John. Beds on the ground, like in communities in real life, a lot of them are not designated for specific household types, right? Like a shelter might have 10 beds and like they serve who they serve, whoever has the most need. But in HMIS and in the LSA, we do have the expectation that there's like this demarcation between household types. I would refer again to the bed and inventory section in the HMIS data standards because it does give a specific definition of what the household types for bed and unit inventory means. So for a household with at least one adult and one child, or AC household, that definition is beds and units typically serving households with at least one adult and one child. And so since that is not what is kind of happening on the ground with the agency, I think it would be best to make the switch. Another thing that I try and think about or put into perspective for bed inventory is thinking about how it should be reflective of what is actually happening with the project on the ground, right? So if the project is only serving adult-only individuals or adult-only households, and that's like what they serve all year, even if they could potentially serve adult-child households, what they do end up serving are adult-only households. You want the inventory to be reflective of what was actually taking place with the project. So if possible, I would encourage you to take a closer look at that and maybe make a switch. Okay, and then back to Nate, because there is another question about bed inventory. So would that also be the case for non-congregate hotel ES projects since there's no set bed inventory? I do want to clarify that the difference that we're talking about between inventory related to the HICK versus inventory related in HMIS, that is solely for rapid rehousing, because the guidance on how you would collect and report that inventory is different than what we get on the HICK versus what is in HMIS. For even a shelter project that does not have a set number of beds, you would still want to follow the same methodology in estimating the number of beds and units on a given night. And that is likely what you probably did already in your HICK. One thing that I want to point out while I have everyone on this call is for the comparison flags, the inventory comparison flags, those are looking at a single point in time, right? Those are just looking at the night of your COC's point in time and HICK. It is completely possible and probable that your year-round inventory for all of your projects is different than what you reported on the night of the HICK, right? Because there's just a lot of fluctuation happening with projects and bed inventories and things like that. But you know, for the most part, since those flags are just looking at a single point in time, most of the time we would expect those numbers to match up just for that one night, with the exception of rapid rehousing inventory, because the guidance for collecting and reporting that inventory is different.
John, did you want to follow up with Joshua?
Yes, I was actually attempting to do that on mute, so sorry about that. Josh, the reason that you're not seeing the ability to leave notes is because it looks like you've only uploaded local use zip files for which you cannot leave notes, and that's intentional because we don't expect to review those either. So go ahead and upload as an official HUD review file, and then you should be good to go.
And I just like echo that if anyone else, I think we do have a handful of people without official uploads right now. So if you're on this call and you think you have an upload, but you can't see notes or whatnot, definitely double check that. And if you don't have an official and try to upload and have trouble, reach out. Sean, maybe this most recent one, I was about to jump in and answer it. So this question of, once all our current warnings have been addressed, are we done, or will there be more warning/error flags added later? I think I can answer it, but if you want to.
Sure, I will say that. Hi, Andrea. So there are we're not adding any new flags to the system during the submission cycle. So the only new flags that you would see are new issues that would come up like natively in your data, which we don't expect. It depends on what you're doing to clean your information. But usually it's the case that on resubmissions, people have fewer flags. So yeah, so you are done when all of your warning flags individually are green, and then when that's the case, your reviewer team will mark your whole data set as complete. So yeah, that should address that.
Good thing that also has addressed the errors.
Right. Yes. So you want to submit with his ideally no errors, and otherwise just have cleaned them to as few errors as possible.
All right, Megan, it looks like you have some answers for a couple people. Are you on mute, Megan? Yeah, sorry.
Double minute, thank you. So I have a question from Nicole related to overlapping PSH enrollments. And we did investigate and saw that you submitted an AAQ. Because that has a sort of very specific policy sort of review that's required to answer that question, that will have to be actually kicked over to HUD to answer. And we'll prod them on that and make sure you get a response as quickly as possible. But that's something that we won't be able to answer today. So we apologize for that. The other question is related to emergency shelter enrollment and specifically related to the moving people into quarantine housing during their shelter enrollment. And the person who asked this question wanted to know if they should exit and re-enroll those clients. And while that would be ideal from a data quality perspective, we sort of are wondering the feasibility of that depending on the number of enrollment. So if the person who answered this question answered it privately, so I'm not going to say their name now, if they want to reach back out to us, we can look at this a little bit more closely.
And I just want to, we are feverishly pulling all the questions from the chat and assigning them and looking into them, as kind of Megan alluded to. So that's why sometimes they're taking a little longer to look in and get back to you. And then while there's some dead space, but we are definitely pulling all of them and hoping to get to them. And also just a reminder, we will still type up all of these questions and post them with the materials. It'll probably be either the end of, probably the beginning of next week. So if you will be able to kind of go in and grab the answers, and we definitely review those and make sure they're clear before posting.
Carissa, I can answer a question from you. You said, I previously did an official upload. When I tried to add another one today, it stated that there is only one official upload allowed. What am I doing wrong? So my guess is that you clicked on the upload new button and tried to upload a fresh upload. The best way for you to proceed is instead to go to the data quality flag views, your errors and warnings report, and then to click on the replace upload button. That's the way that HDX keeps track of how your warnings and errors change from one upload to the next. So you can just kind of keep replacing those, and you'll be redirected to another page that will take you to another upload page. My pleasure, Carissa.
I wanted to respond to Lori's question. So Lori asked if we did our PIT and HICK on a different night other than in January, does the LSA look at the COCs original pick and hit date to compare to the HICK, or is it looking at the end of January? And HDX 2.0 does know the date of your COC's hit and HICK, so that is what it is comparing to. Okay, and I also want to respond or speak to Lisa's question. And the question is about the inventory explanation from earlier. So due to the pandemic and now winter season, shelters are constantly adding and closing beds. I've had to adjust inventory for each shelter to match what was uploaded in the HICK back in January. If you expect fluctuations and small fluctuations are not required to be recorded in HMIS, why do you warn us about small bed discrepancies? So that's a good question. That's a good call out. So I do want to recommend, if you haven't already, to reach out to your liaison on this particular specific issue, because I don't have enough from this chat. Lisa, maybe you could elaborate a bit more in the chat, but the flag is only looking at a single point in time. And so the thinking is that what is reported on the HICK for emergency shelters should be the same as what you report in HMIS. For the inventory in HMIS, you've got start dates and end dates on these inventory records. And you might have overlapping inventory records. That's fine. The system is just looking at that one date at that one point in time to compare against the HICK. And so when you said that you had to update your shelter, all your shelters and their inventory to match the HICK, is it that the numbers were small, like the discrepancies were small, or were there larger discrepancies and that just hadn't, like larger discrepancies and those just kind of like built up over time, and they may have started off small? I guess, I mean, just to be like really honest with everyone on the call. So like I was a former HMIS admin at a large balance of state, right? And so inventory was always a not very fun part of my job in trying to ensure that that was correct and up to date. And the reality was that, you know, as the HMIS lead, we were usually the last to know about changes in inventory. But that being said, you know, we tried to do our best and we did not include minor changes in inventory. At the same time, what is reported on the HICK for everything except rapid rehousing, right? Because we already know that rapid rehousing is whack and like the guidance is just completely whack and different from one thing to another. But like for the other projects, for your emergency shelter, your transitional housing, your permanent supportive housing, for that single point in time, what is in HMIS, you know, we would expect that to match, like just for that one date. Things could be different. You know, your emergency shelters, you know, the very next day after the point in time count could have, you know, 20 extra beds that were added, or even 2 months or 3 months or 6 months down the line. They might have a significant bed change. Those you would want captured in your HMIS records. smaller ones, not so much, but just like for that single point in time, like if you're reporting on the HICK that you've got 10 beds for this emergency shelter project, then when we look in HMIS for that single point in time, for that single date, we would expect to see those 10 beds represented. Yes, they do compare subpopulations to the HICK.
Victoria, I'm wondering if you can maybe take a second to, we've got, just related to especially these small numbers and people talking in the chat of just like kind of bringing up the topic of what to put in warning notes. And I know we got some general questions about that in things. So just like, what would you be hoping to see from people generally in this warning note for these kinds of issues that are related?
Yeah, so in thinking specifically of these HICK comparison flags, one thing that we always want to know is which is the correct number. Is it the LSA number that is correct, or is it the HICK number that is correct? And usually our default response is if the HICK number is what is identified as correct, then we would expect your HMIS number to match, with the exception, of course, of rapid rehousing. If the LSA number is identified as what is correct, then there's nothing that actually can be done on the HICK side, because there are no corrections that can be done or that can be made to the HICK at this time. And I mean, in general, for any flag or any warning, we're really just looking at context. What are the underlying things happening on the ground in your community that are contributing to the numbers that we're seeing in the flag, right? And just because it's a warning doesn't mean that the data that you see in there is wrong, right? It very well could just be what is happening in your community, and we just want to know, was it, for utilization type flags, was it because there are long stayers? I had a COC explain about a pretty successful initiative in their community where they were able to successfully house like over 2,000 clients, but very quickly. And so that contributed to a low utilization rate, right? So we're just trying to get a sense of like what's actually going on with your projects in your community, so that we have a better understanding of what the data is saying, and so we can kind of use that when we're looking at and analyzing the data later on down the road.
I did just want to call out, so we had a response saying my standard answer is the HMIS inventory is correct. And I just wanted to highlight, and maybe Victoria, if you want to say anything, that is well, if you want to add it, that's an acceptable answer, but also I just wanted to point out that that's a great answer if your HMIS inventory is correct. And to kind of what Victoria was talking about as far as, knowing which one is correct, that is really important for analysis. So if nothing else, and I think we talked about this a lot last year, but maybe not as much this year, to just confirm or to let everyone know that we do try and use as much of your data as possible. Usability is beyond the scope of today's call. and kind of, you know, not what we want the focus of data cleaning to be on, but we do want you to all just know that we do try to use all of the data, and that gets important for the analysis. So that part of knowing which is correct is key. So to Antonio's question about whether there are printout of questions and a recording of earlier office hours, yes. So this is our third office hours. We have posted the first one to HUD Exchange already, and we'll drop that link in the chat. The second office hours from last week will be posted on Thursday, and part of the time between doing it and posting it is that we clean up all the Q&A. We 508 all the documents so they're accessible before we can post them, and so that just takes a little bit of time for all the different moving parts and people involved in that. But so all of this will be posted, and the materials get sent, the link gets sent out to the materials in listserv. Sometimes those are combined. So I think that the plan right now is the registration link for next Tuesday's office hours and the link for the materials from last week will go out in one listserv on Thursday. So be on the lookout for that. If you can't find it or lose it or whatnot, you can always also email your liaison, and they should be able to help you track that down if you are trying to search the HUD Exchange and cannot find it.
Okay, so I do want to circle back around to Joseph's question. Sorry about that. I think it got lost. Some of these bed inventory questions. So Joseph is asking, what is the threshold for the data warning 1307? That is the data completeness and quality for Social Security numbers. And is SSN missing or invalid a null field, or is it including client doesn't know or client refused? So it's looking for null. And the threshold, I believe, I may need to get back to you on that. Second, let me see. I think it might be, well, okay. I think this is like a foot in mouth kind of moment. So I think it might be something, but I want to double check and make sure with other folks who are actually more knowledgeable about the programming of the flags. So I will follow up with you, or someone will follow up with you, Joseph, about that actual threshold number on that. And I also want to, I know that I said it was looking at null, but it is looking at unknown, invalid, or duplicate Social Security numbers. So not just null, but any Social Security numbers that are, I don't know, in my old HMIS admin days, I've seen a lot of like 000 or 9999. So thinking about that for duplicates.
We do have a couple questions that we weren't able to get to, but we are past the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I so appreciate everyone coming. Just to reiterate, all of these questions and our answers will be posted next week. If you, including the ones that we didn't get to today, or we'll follow back up with you if we said they are. If you have any questions in the meantime or want answers in the meantime, you are always welcome to reach out to your liaisons. That is the best and fastest way to get answers for some of these questions, or most of these questions. And then, you know, sometimes your liaison will encourage you to escalate something to the AAQ desk, but most questions related to the LSA can be answered by your review team. So we encourage you to first reach out to the regional inbox. And we thank you so much for coming today, and we'll be back here next Tuesday as well to continue doing something like this, bringing your questions, and hopefully we can get you answers within the time. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.